Welcome to the second installment of our interview lighting setup series. In the previous video, we took a look at building up a big 6x6 softbox that just creates a really nice, soft, flattering key light on your subject. But it takes up some space. So in this video, we're going to take a look at, again, trying to balance the exposure to a window, but we're going to be raking that window a lot closer, so the space for our key light is going to be significantly less than what we had in the last video. So if you haven't checked out the first one, be sure to do so. And also, I think it's a good idea for you to take a look at my documentary interview lighting package video, where I lay out all the gear that I have that I bring with me on pretty much any job, so you can start to see what elements I have to play with to get the setup that we're going to do today. So let's get started. In this series of videos, we are looking at creating 3 different distinct interview setups, all within this one space, which is a challenge that we run into all the time. And so in the previous video, we took a look at shooting against a window over here. But in this one, what we're going to do is we're going to have someone seated at this table with this window in the background. And so just like we did before, the first thing that I want to do is pull out my Artemis app and figure out what frame we want to use. So let me open this up. And again, what I have here is I have our camera that we're shooting on, which is the Canon C500 Mark II, and we're shooting in full frame UHD 16:9. And then I've got my set of lenses, which in this I'm using my Sigma Cine Primes. And so I've got that loaded in as well, so I can toggle through all the different lenses. So let me just start to walk through the space and get a sense of what we might want as our frame so that we know where to start placing our camera. So if we're looking at this, let me first look at a 35. And, I think a 35 is nice, but I think it's going to be a little bit too wide. So let me punch into a 50. And if we look at this, I think having something in that mirror is nice. If I wrap too far, then obviously we're going to start to see ourselves and the camera. So I think if we come somewhere in this range, we're going to have that window to play with. Let me come here and let's just take a look at the 85 just to see. And I think once we get into the 85 world, it starts to get a little too tight to be able to feel all those elements that we want. So I'm going to pull back out here to the 50 and I'm just going to grab a still of that. Great. One thing to look at now that we've decided that we want to have somebody here is we don't really have that much space between, say, putting a chair here and then our wall here. But what we want to do is we want to create a nice soft key that's mimicking what will be coming through these windows. And so we're gonna look at an option to do that. So now that we've figured that out, let me go ahead and bring in my subject. Let's maybe start with something like that. In the placement of our frame, we're going to have our window to the right side of frame and our subject to the left. And so obviously we'll be keying from the window side, so our subject should be on the left looking right. So I've got him a little bit oriented in that way. But let's go ahead and pull up our Artemis again, and let's take a look at what we were thinking as our frame here. And so if we wanted something, I think we had something kind of in this world. And so maybe what I'll do is, it's actually not too bad. Let me just shift him over just a little bit and clock him a little bit more towards the window. I guess it's a matter of, do we want his head into that mirror, or do we want to shift over a little bit more? So maybe I'll take him a little bit closer to the wall. So maybe we do something like this, where his head is just splitting through that mirror. So I think something like this is going to work. So I'm going to take another grab of that. So now that we found that as our frame, you can see now how little space we actually have to work with here, right? I mean, we're only looking at, a few feet from him to the wall. So this is going to create an interesting challenge for us to work with, but I think we've got a good idea of how to solve that. So I have our 50 mil on the camera, and let me just start to frame this up a little bit. Yeah, I think that frame is feeling pretty pretty nice. I feel like I'm sitting a little bit too high. So let me just come down on the sticks. Focus up. And I think he's a little clocked too much. Let me just bring him around just a hair. Great, yeah, I think that is feeling pretty nice. So let me just show you kind of exposure-wise what we're looking at. So this is ISO 800, no ND, at a T1.4. So if I bring this in and I come down, we want to feel a little bit more out the window. That's a 2.8. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just come down to keep us at a T2 for our interview. I'm going to come down to a 400 for an exposure out the window. Just for the intro of this video, I did have on my aperture 300 just bouncing up into the ceiling so that we can see what we're working with. If I turn that aperture 300 off, here's what we've got working in the space. And so let me go ahead and I'm going to turn this back on just so we can see what we're doing as a work light. I'm going to bring the monitor in and then we'll start to build up our key light. All right, so we've got our picture up. The next thing that I want to do, now that we've found our frame, we've got our camera placed, is I just want to start to see what is going to be happening out of these windows today, so that I have a sense of what it is that we have to contend with and if I need to prep anything before the interview starts rolling. So I'm going to use my Sunseeker app, and let me go ahead and pull this up, and let's take a look at what we've got. So as you can see, the track of the sun is making it all the way through this side of the windows today, right? Which means that I'm going to be having direct sun coming in through these windows all day, either coming in through this window or later in the afternoon coming in through that window. What that means is I'm going to be dealing with exposure from full backlight sun for the majority of the day, as well as potentially blasting through depending on what the clouds are going to do. So, you know, at the moment we're not seeing any direct sun hitting this table, but within the next few minutes probably we're going to start to see that. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and start building up the key, get a sense of what we're dealing with, and then if we need to make any adjustments from there, we can before we roll. Since we're going to want a nice large soft source that can still fit into a tight space, we're going to be working with the Westcott C47 Booklight Kit. And this is a phenomenal system that we're going to talk a little bit more about once you can see it. So we're going to get that set up, and I'll kind of walk you through what this thing is all about. So basically, all of the Scrim Gym Cine kits come with a variety of pipe lengths. And basically, with these interlocking connector pieces, you can build this out to whatever size that you need, which is amazing. And I am constantly using the Westcott Scrim Gym Cine, even just as a crossbar, right? If I kind of hang this, I can just hang fabric off of it. You saw what we did in the previous video where I built a 4x6 frame and suspended it on the top of a roller stand and draped that with fabric to create a nice big softbox. And so in this video, we're going to be using the Booklight Kit. And this is a really, really great system. And what you can see is I now have a hinged system that creates a book, right? So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to rotate this around, and I'm going to put the V into here, and I can open this up, and we're going to put our bounce material here, kick a light into it, and then we have our diffusion material here. So for the bounce, we're working with a black and unbleached muslin. If you're working with muslin, oftentimes, it is, you know, it's not fully opaque, right? So if you shine light through it, you can use it as diffusion. And so what we don't want to do is we don't want to have all the light that we're kicking into that losing out the back. We want to be able to return everything that we're throwing at it. And so by making this double-sided with the muslin on one side and the black on the other, is it keeps the muslin's integrity so that everything is being returned. And so then what we can do is we can just hang this up. And again, all of the pipes on the Scrim Gym Cine kits have Velcro, so it is really an easy thing to put together. We have our bounce material set up. And now what we're going to do is we are going to, for our diffusion, is same thing. We've got another 4x6. And this is the half grid, which is the same material that I used on our 6x6 softbox in the previous video. And I really like these grid cloths. These are really great. So again, we'll just Velcro this up. So we've got our book light built, and this took no time at all. I mean, this is a really, really great system that gives you a lot of flexibility in how much space you want to work with, right? I can tighten this up, I can open it up, I can move it around. It's lightweight. It's a fantastic system. So the Westcott C47 book light kit was developed by a good friend of mine, Jem Schofield. And Jem runs the C47, which is an educational source for filmmakers. And if you haven't heard of them or checked them out, I really urge you to do so. And so he partnered up with Westcott to create the book light kit. And it's an ingenious system, as we just saw, right? It packs light, it travels well, and it's going to create a really nice soft source that you can use in any type of interview setup. I really urge you to check out Jem's YouTube channel, the C47, and I'll link to it in the description. And this is a just phenomenal resource for any filmmaker, from just starting out up to having done it for many, many years. Jem is brilliant at being able to distill information down easily and digestibly and present it in a way that you can actually understand what's going on. On the C47's YouTube channel, he has a series called The Daily Drop. And how he does this, I have no idea. But Jem puts out a video every single day looking at various pieces of equipment, various challenges that you might run into and how to solve those. It's an incredible resource. You know, really go and check out Jem's YouTube channel. So now that we've got our book light kit built up, let's go ahead and stick a light in there and see what in the world we're getting out of it. So for our light, I'm going to be using the 600D. You know, this system can very easily be used with something like a 300D or 300X, especially if you're doing a tungsten balance setup where you're not having to compete with windows. But I'm going to go ahead and do the 600, even if it means that I have to dial that way down. It just gives me flexibility where if I need to add more light, I can without having to swap out lights or just hit 100% and wish I had a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and stick the 600D in there and see what it looks like. All right, it's just pointed in there, and I'm going to use the Aperture app to be able to control all of my lights. Let me just turn the 600D off. So 600D is off, and I have my 300X over here just bouncing to give us a little bit of light in the room while we shoot. I'm gonna go ahead and turn that off. Great. So now we can see just what the window is giving us. Again, we're at ND 2 stops, and I'm at a T2 at an ISO 400. So let me go ahead and turn our Aperture 600D on. And you can see again how much room I've got to work with. So I'm not going to need all of that at the moment. So let me just bring this down. Maybe we'll look at something like this. And that's pretty nice. That's at 16%. So in this situation, we might be able to get away with the 300X. But I'm going to hedge my bets and wait and see what's going on with the clouds outside. And if the clouds pop out in the middle of an interview, then I want to make sure that I've got some room to adjust what my key light is doing. So we'll go ahead and leave this for now. One thing that I'm already seeing right now in our frame is I am seeing our book light in the window. Oh, and there we go, right? The light just started coming through the window. I'm getting streaks on the table, and we can see what our exposure challenges can look like, right? And so I might need to even bring this down. There is coming down another stop. So just for the sake of this, I'm going to preserve my T2, I'm going to give myself 2 more stops of ND just to be able to hold that. It looks like our white balance on this is off. Let me bring this to daylight. Things to look for. All right, so now we need to contend with the reflection in that mirror. And I think what we can do is if we just shift our frame so that we can lose more of that. So maybe we do something like that. Shift our subject back a little bit. Let's see if we do that. And if we shake this up a little bit more. There. So that's what's nice, is that we've got some room to be able to just move and adjust what this is doing. So we've got something like that. And as you can see, this light is really starting to come out. And so if we want to preserve even more, this is now coming down another stop. So now you can really start to see when the light's coming through that, how we're going to need to kind of continually make these adjustments as we go until it's ready to roll, and keep our fingers crossed that things stay relatively consistent. But if they don't, then we still have the aperture app to be able to make those subtle adjustments as we're going, which is going to be a really, really nice tool to have. So let me just bring up our key a little bit more here. And now you can start to see, so here we're at 100%. So one thing that we're starting to see is that we are getting this coming in, which is direct sun coming in. So if we want, we can close that off a little bit, which is just going to create a little bit of a flag. Let's see what that looks like. That is nicer. And then it looks like we're getting here, we're actually getting a bounce off the table. You can see that on the side of his face. So we can decide what we want to do with that when the time comes. And you know, there's a piece of me that almost feels like we might be hurting ourselves here, but if we shift over even more and we do something like this, then now we can actually start to see something that's going on the table, which is kind of cool. So again, some of this might depend on how long is your interview going to run and how consistent is that light going to be. So things to kind of factor in. So what's really cool is that just by having this one light up is we're feeling really nice and really natural and very easily competing with the strong light that's coming in from outside. But it is really nice and soft. All right, so let me just go ahead and sit in and see what it's looking like on a person and get rid of our guy here. And then we can start to assess if this is something that's working and what we need to do to change. All right. Okay, so now I am in. And I think, you know, one thing that is always going to be a challenge is when you have people wearing glasses, like I have on right now. Obviously, here is me without glasses. So, you know, that solves all kinds of problems. And so if you know, oftentimes I will actually just ask the subject if they're comfortable not wearing glasses in the interview if you're getting a lot of reflection issues. And, you know, you'd be surprised how many people are actually fine with that. But if they're not, and here we have our glasses, you know, I would say one thing that is really nice is because the larger the source is, then you're not really going to see as much of the light itself in the reflection of the glasses. It's just going to be a bigger, you know, kind of just white source, so it's not going to scream a light. And so in a situation like this where we have all these windows behind us, then obviously our key light is just an extension of those windows. And so if I am seeing a reflection in the glasses, and again, the bigger the source that you have, then the less noticeable that it is that it's a light, and it actually just looks like a window. So, you know, I think in this situation, I'm probably okay with it, or again, I can just ask them to take their glasses off. But if we wanted to see less of the reflection in their glasses, then what I would probably do is just wrap this further around to the side. But what that means is I'm not going to have the amount of wrap on the front of their face, so I'm probably going to have to set something up to kind of create that wrap. And when you do that, you're going to have it high so that it's not being seen in the reflection here. You're going to have to bring it up to the point where you lose it in the reflection of the glasses. So this is always something that you're going to have to contend with. But again, the larger the source, then the less obvious that it is. All right, so now that we're looking at this, one thing that I think that we can play with is whether we want to have a little bit of fill here. Because there is so much sunlight coming in and it is so bright and cheery, you know, I think having this super contrasty probably is going to feel a little bit more kind of moody, and so I will probably bring in a little bit of a bounce over here. You know, the other thing that this will do is whatever bounce that I bring in will help mitigate any kind of erroneous bounce that I'm getting out of the room that's going to change over time. So it's going to both work as effectively a flag and a bounce at the same time. So let me go ahead and set that up. So a lot of the times for my bounce is I'll actually just use, because I've already kind of pre-built these to have, depending, is from my Matthews Road Rags kit, is I'll just build a silk. And this is nice because you know, it's a great bounce material, but it's also not going to scream, you know, kind of hard light. It's a really, really soft way to bounce and return some light. So what you can do with your bounce is you can either just have it come as just a straight fill, but it's not catching a ton of our key light, or you can bring it around and kind of, which I think I'm going to do, let me just show you what this looks like. So if I come like this, and so by putting it over here it's now basically giving us a little bit of kind of a 3/4 back bounce, which I kind of like because it helps so it's not just a full wrap from the key to the fill. Is it kind of this section right in here is kind of falling off, and then you get a nice little return, you know, kind of over the shoulder. So I think I'm going to live with something like this for now. All right, so I think the last thing that I'm going to do for this is the same that we did before, is just to start to kind of sculpt and refine this a little bit. If you notice that if we look at the frame, where our window is it's only open to kind of the top half, right? Whereas right now what we have is the new window that we created with our key light is effectively floor to ceiling. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring in a solid and just kind of cut a little bit off the shirt to again kind of mimic the way that this would be a cut on the background. Is I'm going to cut a little bit of our key light. So there's a few different ways that you could do that, right? You could bring and you could take a piece of duvetine and basically create a full skirt on the bottom of your key light, or you can just come in with like a 2x3 flag and place where that is. And so for this instance, that's what I'm going to do. But again, this is where I think having some scrap pieces of duvetine in your kit is really nice, because you can, especially if your source is even bigger than a 4x6, if we were in the 6x6 like we were before, then you could just bring that in and literally just cut the size of your fabric while still being able to get all the benefits out of the softness of it. All right, so if I walk this in, you can see what that's doing. So I think that's going to be nice, right? Just a little bit of gradation helps kind of sell the idea that this is coming through a window and it's really just falling on the face and not just a blast of light. Okay, and what we can do too is the closer that this is going to get to the subject, then the harder that cut is going to be. But you know, I think that this is really a nice soft source that is very easy to set up, very easy to, you know, make adjustments off of. If you need to have, you know, a tighter space, you can squeeze that in. If you have the room, then you can open it up. Because again, the more separation that you have, the more distance that you have from your bounce to your diffusion, then the more impact you're going to have on the softness. So, you know, that is something that you're going to want to keep in mind. And that's something why, if I have the space, I really like doing that 6x softbox that we did in the previous video. But something like that would never fit in here. You know, doing something with even my 600D with an Octabank would not fit in here. This is a really compact system that still gets you that nice, soft quality of light. So let me go ahead and sit in for our final look and see what we got. So as our key light, we have our 4x6 Westcott C47 booklight kit and the 600D. and the 600D is bouncing into an unbleached muslin, is then being returned through a half-stop grid cloth. And then I just set a 2x3 solid just to kind of cut and reduce the intensity on the light that's falling on my shirt, just to kind of mimic the shape of the window that we have behind us. And then I have a 2x3 silk as my fill, and I'll just pivot this in and out, and you can see what that's doing. And again, it's a really subtle thing, where here you can see that there's kind of no definition in the ear or on the side of my face. But then as I bring that in, then it starts to just fill a little bit back here while still leaving a little bit of a strip of kind of darker area that to me feels very natural. And it feels like I'm sitting at a window. But this is a really nice, soft source. And again, as our exposure in the windows outside is coming up and coming down, then I have full control through the Aperture app to be able to control my key light, which I think is pretty amazing, especially if you're doing all of this by yourself. So just for comparison, this is the key light off. So this is our starting point in the room, right? You can see that we're just exposed for the window outside. We've got the really nice stuff coming onto the table back here, but it's really dark. And so being able to have something like a 600D to be able to bring that up is quite nice. And so, you know, again, as you can see that if I need to just crack open my iris a little bit when the clouds go in, I can bring the intensity of this light down. And then when the sun comes back out, I can just stop down a little bit to control the window, and then I can bring up the key light. All right, well, I think that pretty much covers it. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful in kind of seeing what this Westcott C47 book light kit can do for you, especially in a tight space like we're working with today. I think this interview setup turned out really, really well. And again, I am such a big fan of just a single light source for my interviews, especially in a daylight environment. To me, it's the most natural. I don't feel the need to have a lot of backlight, edge light, you know, background lights going on. I really just like the feeling of a soft, natural daylight, and this really delivered well. So thank you so much for watching this video, and be sure to check out next week's video, which will be the third and final installment of our interview lighting setup series. And I think this one's going to be a really fun one as well. So thank you so much for watching, and look forward to seeing you again soon.